everybody, it's Angel Ghost Girl here, and today's video is going to be a Haunted Reads Paranormal Read Aloud. But I call it Haunted Reads. I'm your host, Angelica, and right now we are reading Paranormal, Ghosts, Aliens, and the Unexplained, Haunted Grounds, The Mystery of Bigfoot, Witches of Past and Present. And the cover looks like this. Right now we're reading Witches and Black Magic, page 33. And the next page we are going to read mostly of looks like this. So we're gonna look. I'll explain more about this because there's a little section right here that we have to read. So we'll read this section at the end, but this is pictures. I'll show them. Start a little section at the bottom of the previous page. Codifying torture. The Protestant Reformation, graded in 1517, when Martin Luther nailed his 95 V's to the Wittenberg church door, only increased the Catholic Church's commitment to routing out the destroying heresy, including witchcraft. One coincidence was that the 16th century would see many bloody witch trials. In 1532, Holy Roman Empire Charles V issued the first body of German criminal law, known in Latin as the Constitutional Criminalis Carolina, which codified and systematized the various laws in operation in the far-flung realms of the empire. Importantly, it also defined the procedures involved in discovering an accused person's guilt or innocence, which included torture according to the Constitutional Criminalis Carolina. When someone offers to impart sorcery to other people or threatens to bewitch someone, and such befalls the threatened person and the foresaid person otherwise has associated with men or women, sorcerers, or has employed suspicious things, gestures, words, and signs such as characterize sorcery, and when further the said person has a bad reputation of similar sort, then the constitutes a allegedly sufficient indication of sorcery and is dictated basis upon which to examination under torture. The Constitutional Criminalis Carolina made it virtually impossible for accused witches to establish their innocence, and if by some miracle an alleged witch was able to exonerate themselves, the judge and complainant incurred no penalty on account of the aforementioned legal improper examination under torture, because the incriminating indication made out gave reason and excuse for the examination which took place. For the law says that one should keep oneself not only from the committing of crime, but also from all appearance of evil of the sort that can cause ill repute or indication of crime. And he who does not do that has himself in this way caused his own complaint, and in this case the accused shall bear his own support. While in jail, since he supplied ground for his being suspected, 10 years after the Constitutional Criminalis Carolina, England's Parliament passed the Witchcraft Act, which made practicing witchcraft a felony and therefore punishable by death. Though England's King Henry had broken the Catholic Church and established the Church of England, he retained many Catholic beliefs, such as concern over witchcraft. Parliament repealed the Witchcraft Act in 1547, but restained it in 1563. The new act in some ways softened the terms of the earlier one, reserving death for those cases which a witch actually harmed someone. However, witchcraft was taken quite seriously. More than 1 in 5 homicides during this period were attributed to witchcraft, with approximately 50% of the accused witches, virtually all of whom were women, being convicted and executed. Ghastly executions. These events paled in comparison, however, to the 70-year reign of terror that began in 1560. Between the date and 1630, witch trials across Europe produced the greatest number of executions, with numbers of victims stretching into the tens of thousands. In Chelmsford, Essex County in England, between 1566 and 1586, more than 400 people were accused of practicing witchcraft, and 3 women and a man were hanged. England did not burn its witches. Essex was a hotbed of witchcraft, apparently accounting for 60% of witch trials and a whopping 83% of executions. Women accounted for nearly all executed witches. In 1604, King James I expanded the number of punishable offenses related to witchcraft. A believer in the power of the occult, James is fascinated with and fear of witches likely accounted for the presence in William Shakespeare's 1611 play, Macbeth, of the Weird Sisters, 3 witches who at one point hunched over a bubbling cauldron, adding gratuitous ingredients to their brew while chanting an incantation. They're portrayed as vile and evil, but also powerful in their prophecies drive the play's action. The year after Macbeth was first performed, 2 witch trials in Lancaster, one in Salisbury and the other in Pendle Hill, resulted in the deaths of nearly a dozen people, almost all of whom were women. Across the English Channel in 1632, the Catholic Church burned at the stake a priest named Urban Grandier, who was allegedly directing evil spirits to possess the Ursuline nuns living in a nearby convent. That Grandier had run afoul of the local bishop and was a critic of priestly celibacy, did little to help his case, and he was born in public, though the so-called possessions continued for several years. The Witchfinder General. Between 1644 and 1647, Matthew Hopkins, the self-styled Witchfinder General, terrorized southern eastern England. In just over a year, he was allegedly responsible for the executions of at least 100 and perhaps many more people. Hopkins' results were likely due to the liberal use of sleep deprivation, cutting with a knife, and swimming, trying the accused to a chair and the accused to a chair and tossing their chair into water. In addition, Hopkins and his associates would have shaved accused witches and then pricked them with knives in order to discover the mark of the devil. Hopkins' reign of terror came to an end with his death in 1647, but by then his methods, described in his book The Discovery of Witches, had been carried across the Atlantic to Great Britain's Northern American colonies. In 1658, a woman named Elizabeth Garlick was put on trial for witchcraft in East Hampton, New York. In February of that year, a 16-year-old woman named Elizabeth Gardner Howell had recently given birth, began raving about strange visions she was having. A few days later, she died. Suspicions quickly turned to Garlick, who allegedly committed all manner of damage on her neighbors. Garlick was tried for witchcraft but found not guilty. An end to the slaughter. As the 17th century came to a close, the fever of witch hysteria began slowly breaking in Europe, but only after the estimate of 50,000 accused witches, mostly women, were burned at the stake and more than half that number hanged. Around 80% of the executed were women, thought to be in the cahoots with the devil and filled with lust with Germany, had the highest witchcraft execution rate, while in Ireland had the lowest. In 1682, France's King Louis curbed further with trials, while that same year England hanged Mary Trembles and Susanna Edward, the last two individuals executed for witchcraft in the country. In fact, the most famous witch trial, those in Salem, Massachusetts, in 1692, were something of the last gasp of witch hunting in the English-speaking world. See more on page 38. In 1717, England held its last trial for witchcraft, and the case was thrown out. 2 decades later, the Parliament adopted the Witchcraft Act of 1735, which incriminated the pretense of witchcraft, implying that legislators no longer believed witchcraft actually existed. In the coming decades, several other countries ended witchcraft trials. Through the last person prosecuted for witchcraft in the United States was Joseph Strout, who in the earlier 1830s was arrested on suspicion of witchcraft in Tennessee. The grand jury refused to indict him, and he construed the men who arrested him. They tried to defend themselves on the basis of the English Witchcraft Act, which Tennessee had never repealed. The judge rejected that defense but dismissed the case, bringing an end to the last American witchcraft trials. So we're going to read this little section here real quick, because this is the end of the video for today. Matthew Hopkins sentenced at least 100 alleged witches to death, and his horrid ideas spread to the New World, where they continue to cause executions opposite. The 3 witches in Macbeth are depicted as hags, foretelling and perhaps promoting doom over a bubbling cauldron. Which it really doesn't. I guess that's supposed to be kind of like here, but there's no cauldron. But yeah, just get a little closer up on some of the pictures. I'm assuming this is the witch hunter general right there. But if you like videos like this, then like and subscribe and comment. Until next time, everybody, sweet dreams, or should I say sweet nightmares.